If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
Let's get to it. The time for talk and prognosticating is almost over because on Saturday, the Knicks will take the court at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse to take on the Cleveland Cavaliers for Game 1 of the NBA playoff. Tip-off is set for 6 p.m. Eastern time, so be there or be square. The Knicks won the season series over the Cavs 3-1 with their last win powered by a career-high 48 points from Jalen Brunson. That was on March 31st. That was also the team's first game without Julius Randle this season. He has been sidelined with a sprained ankle and has yet to be cleared for full contact in practice. He has done partial things in practice. He's done some shooting. He's done some full-speed sprinting, but no contact as of yet. As we record this podcast Friday morning, I guess maybe we'll get more word, but it sounds like the Knicks will probably play this right up until near tip-off in terms of whether or not Julius Randle will play in Game 1. Meanwhile, the Cavs returned to the playoffs for the first time since LeBron James left the franchise in 2018 when they lost to the Golden State Warriors for a second time. But the reserve, Seti Osman, is the only player left on that 2018 roster. So last time they were in the playoffs, they were in the finals, but only Osman is the guy who's still on that roster. So an entirely different team, an entirely different makeup, an entirely different coaching staff leading the Cavs this season. So let's talk about the importance of Game 1s because we're starting this discussion in this podcast talking about Game 1. Game 1s have always been super important in the NBA. Teams that win Game 1 in the 2-2-1-1-1 format of a 7-game series, they've gone on to win their series 75% of the time, almost, or more than 75%. They're 304-100 when they win Game 1 of the playoffs. So let's also talk about road teams playing in Game 1 because that's where the Knicks are right now. Very crucial the Knicks win this game because teams that win Game 1 on the road go on to win their series is about 48% of the time. Teams that lose Game 1 in their series go on to win about 14% of the time. Those teams are 42-250 in series, while teams that win Game 1 are 54-58. So this is a crucial game for the Knicks coming in here in Game 1 as the road team. So I asked Tommy first, when you think about this matchup, looking into Game 1 particularly, what are some of the things you're going to be looking for right out of the gate to kind of maybe give an indication of how this series will go?
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, immediately, it's going to be Julius Randle and his ankle. One, is he on the floor? And that right now, it seemed like we were trending in the right direction earlier in the week. And depending on who you ask, on who you listen to, it sounds like he may not suit up, or you're pessimistic that he's going to play. He still hasn't been cleared for contact. I wouldn't read too much into that. Again, I think your point is well taken that they're going to play right up close to the vest and they're going to leave it up in the air for as long as possible and basically and not give any details and firm details or plans until basically they're legally obligated to, because as we've discussed, it makes sense to do so, to force the Cavs to kind of prepare. Will Obi be in the starting lineup? And that if so, the Knicks are a different team. They play with a much faster pace. Obviously, the usage gets divvied up far greater among Randall and Barrett and Brunson. And Grimes get more shots, whereas O's more of a finisher. So that's kind of what we'll see. I did see a quote from Jared Allen yesterday. There was a clip of him saying, you guys think Julius Randle might not play? They're kind of chuckling, like basically saying we're preparing for Julius Randle to start, and play Game 1 and beat Julius Randle essentially. That's kind of what they're game planning for, which I think makes sense. The fact that he's practicing. But again, so much up in the air. I think we'll get a better feel as EJ mentioned. We're recording this Monday morning.
Friday,
Friday morning.
Mm-hmm.
See what Tibbs has to say post practice today. Again, even if he is not cleared for full contact, that doesn't mean he's not going to play. Saturday morning shoot around. We'll see. We're basically going to have to play this by ear. It'll probably be a game time decision. I should say it will probably, at least the Knicks will say it will be a game time decision. Whether they make a determination, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Friday night, Friday at point, I'm sure they have a good sense. I'm sure Randall has a good sense. I'm sure the team has a good sense, and they're gonna keep that in house. But yeah, I mean, obviously, and assuming that he does play, how does he look? Is he, is any signs of limping? Does he? Because he was really explosive, and we know what he brings to the table.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the first thing I'll keep an eye on. First few possessions of game one, if he's out there, and if not, how the Knicks look without him will be the story.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned kind of Randall's explosion, Randall being a physical player. Not to say that anybody wouldn't be, less of themselves with an ankle injury, but it feels like Randall's the kind of guy that if he was compromised, he would, be far less effective out there. So Randall and his health in this situation, of course, is the main story coming into game one. But if I take a step outside of that in terms of what I'll be watching for in game one, almost regardless of whether or not he's out there, because I think the strategy may not change, I will be very curious to see how the Cavs guard pick and roll coverages with Jalen Brunson. They kind of let Jalen Brunson just cook the last game, and boy, did he cook. I mean, he was cooking up shrimp pasta. He was cooking up steaks. He was cooking up he did all the fine delicacies because, man, that 48-point performance he had, a 33-point first half performance was an absolute masterclass. And the Cavs took notice, and JB Pickerstaff said that it was a wake-up call for his team, and that they definitely saw, just how dangerous a scorer Jalen Brunson is. So we've seen teams employ this a couple of times this year, kind of sporadically, saying, okay, we're going to try to take the ball out of his hands. And Jalen Brunson is a very unselfish player from that regard, where he'll give it up. I'll be curious to see if that's something the Cavs do immediately in game one. Is that how they start this series? They plan A to say, hey, we're going to take the ball out of Jalen Brunson's hands, make RJ, make Quentin Grimes beat us. Or will they say, we're going to play this straight up? We have Isaac Okoro. He's back. Maybe he's not 100%, but he's close to 100%. Let's see how he does man up against Jalen Brunson before we make that adjustment. I think that's going to be crucial. I think if the Cavs mess around and don't try to get Jalen Brunson's the ball out of Jalen Brunson's hands, I think that could be a disaster for the Cavs. I think that would be a big mistake. I think they're going to have to find a way to get the ball out of his hands, make Mitchell Robinson on the short roll really the decision maker, make Julius Randle more of the decision maker on those short rolls, as opposed to making Jalen Brunson do what he wants. So I'm really curious to see how the Cavs guard JB. He's the difference from the 2021 team, outside of course, Mitchell Robinson being back and the bench guys being a lot better. But when you really look at why the Knicks have a chance in the first round, you start with saying, well, now they have Jalen Brunson. Now they have that point guard. So how teams guard this star point guard that the Knicks have, I think, will be a very important thing to watch for in this series.
And similarly, on the other end of the floor, how do the Knicks defend Donovan Mitchell? He's capable of 35, 40, 45 points in a big playoff game. As a dude that's averaged 35 plus points for a series and shot and slash 50, 40, 90. He's as good an offensive player, especially once he gets going. So do you let, and the age old question, do you let the guy, get his 44 points and then, but prevent other guys from, getting, Mobley dunks at the rim and Jarrett Allen easy shots, close the basket. Do you drop off, to prevent those easy buckets off pick and rolls? That kind of action, because the Cavs are going to look to put Knicks, really stress the Knicks defense. Just in relation to the Brunson point, the only really injury question from the Cavs side of things is Isaac Okoro. He injured his knee, I believe it was March 26th, was the game, the 28th rather. It was the game prior to Brunson's 48-point explosion in Cleveland. And Okoro is the guy that's basically tasked with covering the opposing team's top perimeter scorer, top perimeter player. Yep. We saw it earlier in the season. The January meeting between the two teams did a really good job holding Brunson at 5 of 13 shooting. And obviously he wasn't there, for the 48-point game. So assuming he plays, and again, we'll probably get the injury reports, the first injury report. The teams will most likely release it this evening, Friday evening. My assumption is Randall will be listed as questionable. If Randall's listed as doubtful, then there's obviously major cause for concern there, which basically 75% chance he's not going to play. And teams can't really mess around too much on that with all the gambling implications and all that other stuff. The list is
Right.
pretty, in other words, they're not going to list him as doubtful, and if he's actually probable, that type of thing. If he's listed as probable, that's obviously great news for the Knicks. That means he's going to play. But again, questionable leaves you in that, on the fence area, which is what I think they'll be. Coro may be listed as questionable as well, but he's probably closer to the probable side of that tag. So we'll see. We'll see. Obviously, everyone will keep an eye out for the injury report, which should drop sometime this evening.
Yeah, just watching clips while we were talking of Okoro covering Brunson, and he did a pretty good job on him in those 1-on-1 matchups. So he's going to be a crucial piece of the series. I know we talked plenty about Donovan Mitchell. We talked plenty about Garland, but his defense on Jalen Brunson may end up being the difference, especially if they don't decide to take the ball out of Brunson's hands, blitz screens, double screens, and they're saying, okay, we're going to let Isaac Okoro, our best defender, take on this matchup. This is essentially why we drafted him, right? Like, we didn't draft Obi Toppin. We drafted this kid because he was a Swiss Army knife defensively. He can get after it, guard multiple positions. So maybe they say, hey, let's go, kid. This is the opportunity. This is what we've been asking for. Or maybe they say, hey, you're going to play tough on-ball defense, but we're going to give you a lot of help. And that would open things up for other guys. And that's where the R.J. Barretts, the Emmanuel Quickleys, of course, Randall, Josh Harts, and Quentin Grimes have to make plays. When you look at – one thing I will say, too – yeah, go ahead.
Sure. One other thing on Okoro, just before we move on, you kind of think of him as, a defense only guy, those players, those Bruce Bowen type guys, obviously not on the defensive level of that, but, a guy you basically can ignore completely on offense. And yes, the Knicks are going to dare to shoot. Isaac Okoro beats you, then he beats you, so be it. But looking at the numbers, he actually shot a lot better than I would have thought. Over the final 44 games he appeared in, so basically dating back to Christmas, he shot 54% from the floor, and most importantly, 43.4% from deep. So this is not a guy that's going to be scared to death to take a corner three if he's wide open. He's going to, the Knicks will live with him taking and making them. But again, it's not, don't be shocked if Okoro knocks down 3 big threes at some point, in game one. And it's, again, those are the type of guys, and the role players tend to play better at home, all that type of stuff. Going into a playoff series, it's, and a game that I think most folks will assume will be tight, throughout the contest. Those could be some big shots that Okoro takes, and we'll see if he makes them.
Yeah, he's going to have opportunities. I think for the Knicks, they can't overreact to shot making from some of these other guys. We know Cass LeVert is going to make some shots. Okoro is going to get some wide open threes. It's just, you have to give up something. When you come to playoff basketball, particularly, you have to decide, what are you willing to live with? What are you willing to give up? You can't take everything away. So Isaac Okoro is going to get some threes, and he's going to make some. And you're going to have to live with that, because you can't have Donovan Mitchell going for 50. You can't have Garland going for 40. So you're going to have to live with those. You're going to have to live with Cass LeVert getting some buckets. You're going to have to live with a couple of things. But what you can't live with is giving up everything. It's saying, okay, those guys are getting off, but also Donovan Mitchell's getting his, Garland's getting his, Allen's rolling to the basket. They got to be able to take certain things away. So when it comes to Garland pick and roll, do you take away the roll man and be comfortable with Garland taking a lot of in between, maybe kind of contested twos? That's something that we talked about with Jackson Gillette yesterday, and Jackson was awesome from Fear the Sword. Like, these are the kind of things the Knicks are going to have to discuss. That's kind of what I was going to come to in this next discussion. Was, to me, I am very curious what they do also defensively, as you mentioned. I feel like I could only take what I saw in the last playoff series with Tom Thibodeau as a head coach. But from what I saw, Thibodeau seems like the kind of guy that the Knicks are going to do what they do, and there really won't be much of an adjustment until it's like dire, necessary, last resort kind of things. Like, we watched that series against the Hawks, and, they didn't hunt Trae Young until like game 4 or game 5. They didn't really take the ball out of his hands until game 4. Like, they went into a series with a certain strategy, and when it was clear and obvious it wasn't working, there was a switch. But to me, it almost felt like it was too late. It was too difficult to adjust at that point in time. The series was already over. I'll be very curious to see what the.
They didn't catch up for Payton until halfway through the series,
Yeah, exactly. Like, there were these moves that were very clear that probably should have been made from the beginning that didn't happen. So I think the Knicks will come in saying, hey, they don't typically double guys really. Like that's not really what they do. So I think they're gonna let Quentin Grimes go out there and guard Donovan Mitchell. And it worries me a little bit, not because Grimes isn't capable, not that he's not a great defender, but like Donovan Mitchell is Donovan Mitchell. This guy is gonna be probably a first team all NBA player. So I'm wondering if Mitchell has a big game one and the Knicks lose. I'm really hoping that there's a quick adjustment on how they cover that. Now if Grimes does the job and their defense is solid and they play their principles well, then I'm not saying if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'll just be very curious to see, is there any change to how they normally guard a player like Donovan Mitchell, and if it doesn't work, how quick will that be adjusted?
I will say this: in that 48-point Brunson game, the Knicks win March 31st. Let's not forget Mitchell was the guy that looked like he was going to, erupt for.
Yeah, I thought he was going to get 50. Yeah,
he hit his first 8 shots, was 9 of 10 in the first quarter, had 23 points. So it looked like he was going to cruise, and then Hart came in. Grimes actually did a good job, a decent job defensively. It wasn't like he got lost in backdoors.
Oh yeah, he was hitting tough shots. Yeah.
Do tough contested threes, and that's what Donovan Mitchell does. I mean, there are not many more talented shot makers on the planet. But then Hart came in, did a good job against him, and something else we'll talk about in the next segment. But a key part of that game was Hart throwing an offensive foul on Donovan Mitchell. About 4 minutes left in the second quarter, Mitchell went to the bench. Knicks made a run to close the half. The Knicks will be focused on trying to get those guards in foul trouble, and something we'll talk about consistently throughout the series is depth is a big Knicks advantage. So if you can tire that core 4 out or get them in foul trouble. And one other thing regarding the kind of Mitchell defensive tactics, etc. I'll be very interested to see if Deuce McBride gets some run. Does Tibbs throw him in for 3 minutes in the start of the second quarter, for 4 minute stretch in the the end of the third, just to kind of muck up the game a little bit? McBride is as good at the perimeter defender as the Knicks have. Does he throw him on Garland and press him 94 feet to kind of take some starch, take some air out of his tires? Those are the kind of things. We'll see. I don't know if it'll happen in game one, depending on how, if Grimes is knocking down his shots, IQ, Brunson, etc. But that's something that, kind of Tibbs might keep in his back pocket based on the feel of the game. If he needs some aggression, if he needs some energy, if he needs a spark, I could see him going to McBride and leaning on McBride's defense. And then, then of course the opposite is the Cavs are going to ignore McBride on the defensive end and let him shoot threes. Does he knock down a jumper or two? Those are the key things that tend to decide playoff games. So it'll be fascinating to watch.
Yeah, that's an important point. I think McBride or Larry at least one to kind of keep an eye on, because if you guys remember the last series against the Hawks, with that whole situational thing that Tibbs says, which in the regular season usually means your ass is on the pine. Yep. It doesn't really. It's different in the playoffs because he in the biggest part of that series. Remember, he threw in Frank Ntilikina cold to guard Trae Young on the final possession in a game that the Knicks lost on a Trae Young floater. Frank was situational, and he also put Frank in again the next game, in game 2, I think at the end of the first half, to play a certain situation. So Tibbs, in terms of those little quick, press kind of guys, those defensive guys, he will throw you out there during these kind of situations. So it didn't necessarily work well at all for the Knicks in that series against the Hawks. I don't know if maybe he'll say that didn't work, so I won't do it here. I tend to think that he may still give McBride that opportunity. And given this matchup where you have 2 high-end guards, it feels like this is a series that McBride is going to have to get some minutes in, because whether it's foul trouble, because of just how electric some of these guys can be, like if Garland gets going or Mitchell gets going, like you may just need to throw McBride out there, give these other guys a blow, give them a different look. So I think that the McBride point actually is one that I don't think I've heard many people talk about yet, but I do wonder if we'll see any of McBride here. Keys, just on game 1, because we're about to get to the series, but keys to Knicks win in game 1 in your eyes.
Obviously, we talked about Randall. If it's close, Brunson's going to have to hit some big shots. He's their best clutch player. And then, and as we talk about the series going forward, my X factor is RJ Barrett. Kind of how he
Same
plays.
as me.
So, we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth in the next segment. But yeah, listen, you bring up great points about the importance of Game 1. It feels like we've been prepping and preparing this game for a week. You kind of know what you're going to get from Josh Hart. You know what he brings to the table. You know what Brunson brings to the table. Mitch Hartenstein and the second unit IQ seems built for these moments. Can Grimes continue his momentum? A lot of question marks going in. RJ Barrett's the one guy who has struggled, so we'll see if he can kind of get back on track because the Knicks are going to need him.
Yeah, and I think for me in Game 1, I want to see Knicks get off to a good start. I think that you have a Cleveland team coming in, a lot of excitement around the team. They had a great season. Of course, they made the trade for Mitchell, and now it's playoff time. Any chance they can maybe take advantage of maybe some early nerves, I think the Knicks it'll be important for them to get out early, get out and run early, particularly, don't necessarily be in love with playing in the half court. Like I thought one of the things that really took Cleveland by surprise in that last game was how much the Knicks were getting up and down the court. Of course, the Knicks are a lot different team when Randall's in the starting lineup compared to when Obi's in the starting lineup. But I think whoever starts, the Knicks got to take what they saw in that and say, hey, we can run on these guys, get some easy shots, because you don't want to play against that set Cleveland defense. Cleveland set with those two Twin Towers, it's going to be a long, long series. So I think the Knicks got to get up and down the court, get off to a fast start, and try to see if they maybe get out to an early first quarter lead and kind of make Cleveland play catch up as opposed to trying to play from behind against a Cavs defense that we know is vaunted.
Good point. And the other thing is, again, the added importance of Randall. He's been the guy that set the tone in the entire season.
In first quarter.
Second in the league behind Luka Doncic in terms of points scored in the first quarter. So often, each and every night, he's the guy that gets you, your first 3 or 4 buckets, 10, 12 points in that first quarter, which really helps set the tone. One thing about, trying not to overreact to big leads or large deficits, et cetera, things along those lines. Both teams have shown that they can come back from, double-digit deficits. Cleveland actually 17 wins this season when trailing by at least 10 points was one stat I was picked up in the preparation. So yeah, I expect teams will go out on runs that the other team will counter, and it's just the nature of playoff basketball. But again, to your point, you don't want to fall behind. You don't want to because then you're going to fall into especially if you're the Knicks, you don't fall behind early and have to play catch up and expend all that energy to get back in the game and most concerningly have the tempo pushed up a pace and need to get buckets because you want to stay within tagging distance of this Cleveland team because again and as we'll talk about in the next segment, they are a tremendous defensive team. You don't want to fall behind.
Yeah, and I think also that's a crowd that may not be an angry, scary crowd, but it is a loud, effective crowd. It is not an easy place to play. Cleveland also had one of the best home records in the NBA. That arena is, in the LeBron era, has always been a great home court advantage. So take the crowd out of it early by getting off to a good start in the first quarter. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest podcast ventures. Links will be in the descriptions. And as always, thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next video.
All right. We've done all of the breakdowns. We've done all of the analysis. It is time. It's time to go on record for how we think this series will shake out. The Knicks have not won a playoff series in 2020 since 2013. That's when Carmelo Anthony led the Knicks past the Boston Celtics in Game 6. So I'll ask this question first, Tommy. The Knicks will win this series if what happens?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with my and I think we know what we're gonna get from Brunson and Hart and IQ and Grimes to a lesser extent. And Randall's obviously still question mark, but assuming he plays, we know what he can bring to the table. I think that they need RJ Barrett to be the X factor and positively tip the scales of balance. Two reasons I say that. Defensively, Knicks are going to try to hide Brunson on Isaac Okoro, as we talked about. This gives Brunson a little bit an opportunity to help off drivers and maybe draw some offensive fouls, but also keep him out of foul trouble. And he's just not as talented a defender. He's the weakest defender of the Knicks starting five. So you put him on the guy that Cleveland's going to stick in the corner. That means that Barrett's going to have to switch on to most likely Darius Garland, the primary times. We know how good of a player Garland is. Obviously Mitchell gets most of the highlights, but Garland is one of the up and coming guards in the NBA. Made an All-Star team, age 23. One of the only player in the league with 20 plus points, 7 assists, and shooting over 40% from 3-point land. He's a problem, especially when he gets going. So RJ is going to need to play the best, and we've knocked RJ for his inconsistent defensive approach throughout the season. They need him locked in on the defensive end. Just as importantly, on the offensive end, when the Knicks have the ball, Okoro is going to be guarding Jalen Brunson, which means a cross match is going to be either Mitchell or Garland on RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett has been ice cold from three-point territory, shooting 22% of the last 15 games. Confidence is really at an all-time low, but he's done a better job of driving to the basket, getting into the paint, creating scoring opportunities for himself and his others. Cavs are going to dare him to shoot the threes. Does he take the first couple threes he gets? If he misses them, does he continue to chuck them up, or does he use that space to kind of use it as a runway to get into the paint and create scoring opportunities? Also, I'll be interested to see if they feed RJ in the low post. We've seen him be effective with his back to the basket at times this season. Ideally, what you want Barrett to do, if he makes the threes, that's great. I don't want him taking too many. I want him getting to the basket and putting pressure on the defense, having those bigs, drawing internally. He can kick it out to Brunson. He can kick it out to Grimes. We know about his trigger. But just as importantly, try to draw some fouls on who's ever guarding, be it Mitchell, be it if it's Darius Garland. Get him the ball. And again, as we've talked about and we'll continue to talk about, if you get Darius Garland out of the game, now Ricky Rubio comes in. And he's been awful offensively. Solid veteran. He's not going to turn the ball over a ton.
He's killed the Knicks in his career, so we know he can be dangerous.
He's had some big spots against the Knicks, but he's shooting 70%. Again, he's just, made his season debut a few months ago, working his way back from a torn ACL. Shooting sub 30%, 40% from the floor, sub 30% from downtown, 20%, I believe, over the last 2 months with Cleveland. So you're going to dare, if he beats you, he beats you. But either way, you'll happily trade. You want to see Garland go off the floor and Ricky Rubio come in. If Mitchell gets in foul trouble, LeVert, obviously LeVert's going to be the other guy too, but he can't play the full 40 minutes. And so those kind of things that I think RJ can really impact the game on both ends of the floor. He's had a disappointing season. There's some talk that he will likely be on the block because he's not a great fit in between, Brunson and Randall, and what's his future? We'll see how it goes. All that being said, he can completely flip the script and rewrite his 2022-2023 season story.
The way they've played all season. In that Hawks series, one of the problems was, besides really the first 2 games, the Knicks bench never really got going. And that was one of their big advantages in that season, was that the Knicks had this great bench. The Hawks bench outplayed the Knicks badly in the last 3 games, and that's why the Knicks were so dominated in those games. This cannot happen this time around. The Knicks bench is going to have to show up big. I think that they will. But I think that is going to be a big part in this series if the Knicks bench shows up.
I totally agree. That was actually my second kind of deciding factor, was the bench. And point, the Knicks bench second unit can't just outplay the Cavs. They need to thoroughly dominate the start of the second quarter, that first 6 minutes of the second quarter, that first 6 minutes of the fourth quarter. Not by a couple points, not hang close. Josh Hart, they have the 6th man of the year in Emmanuel quickly. Josh Hart's, starter on half the other teams in the NBA. Isaiah Hartenstein has played at an incredibly high level on both ends of the floor for the past 2 months. Can they get some dunks for Obi Toppin in transition? Easy baskets, because it's going to be a slog to score against this Cavs team. They make it up, and they're going to make it difficult for you. Can we know Josh Hart is going to grab some defensive rebounds and push the ball up the floor in transition? Is he going to find RJ Barrett cutting the rim? And again, that's RJ Barrett time too. He's usually the lone starter that plays with those other 4 second unit guys. Does Deuce McBride, make an impact defensively? Those are things that the Knicks are going to need to do in order to win this game and the series.
Let's talk about the worst case scenario here. Knicks will lose this series if what happens?
If they play to the way the Cavs want to play. Cavs hold when Cavs hold opponents under 100 points this season, they're 23-1. They 20. Just the fact that they held an opponent under 100 points 24 times this season is remarkable. And as we know in today's NBA, no other team in the NBA had more than 16 such games. The Celtics held an opponent under 100 points 16 times. They were second in the league. Cavs number 1 at 24 times and 23-1 of those contests, as you might expect. So if they can slow the pace down, have the Knicks, struggled, befuddled, on the offensive end. That's obviously where they make their bread and why they've been one of the best teams in the league. And then ultimately, I think it's going to come down to the final 5 minutes. Jalen Brunson has been the Knicks' best free agent signing in 2 decades plus, arguably in the history of the franchise, because of how well he's played during the regular season. If he wants to elevate his status even higher and have a statue built of this man, he needs to continue that in the postseason, because we've seen all the great players of the Knicks past. Yes, the regular season numbers are cool, but Patrick Ewing is a hero and a legend now because of how well he played against the Heat and the Pacers, and in his postseason appearances. You're wearing a Clyde jersey for 36, 17, and 9. We know about Willis Reed. We know about the legendary Knicks players, and obviously Jalen Brunson's nowhere near those guys. But if he wants to kind of elevate his status to that higher level, and because that's kind of what's going to be the separating factor. Obviously, he has an opportunity to do so, and he's going to have an opportunity to do so with the game on the line. We know Randall struggles in the final 5 minutes. Historically through his career, he did not play well in the postseason. We don't. IQ hopefully will knock down some shots. Grimes been hit or miss. What Josh Hart is going to be. There's going to be possessions when it's a 1-possession game, 2-possession game, one way or the other, where the Knicks need a bucket, and they're going to ask Jalen Brunson to do it. He's done it so far this season, one of the best clutch players in the league. But now, the things get ratcheted up. We've seen him do it in the postseason, 11 months ago, 12 months ago, last April, when he sent Donovan Mitchell and the Jazz home almost by himself over those first 3 games. See if he can do it again. But if he doesn't, then the Knicks are going to have a very difficult time scoring in those final few minutes. The game's probably going to go down to crunch time. I think we can feel confident that Mitchell is going to make quite a few clutch baskets of his own. Garland, Mobley, they're going to find a way to get buckets. Can Brunson answer? If he doesn't, Knicks will probably be on the short end of the stick.
I'll say the Knicks will lose, and I will take something from one of my cousins who knows so much about basketball, my cousin James. He always said, talking about the Jordan era, that one of the things that was guaranteed during that Jordan era and why the Bulls won so much was that Jordan was always going to outplay your star, whether it was Patrick Ewing, whether it was Reggie Miller, whether it was whoever it was in that Eastern Conference or in the finals, whether it's Barkley, whether it's Sean Kemp, whether it's Magic Johnson. Jordan always outplayed your star. Clyde Drexler, yes, maybe the most evident example. Jordan always outplayed your star, and he always outplayed them when it mattered most in the clutch. The Knicks will lose this series if the Cavs stars significantly outplay the Knicks stars when it matters most. So you talk about those clutch situations, late games, because there's going to be close games. Whether you think it's Cavs in 5, like Jackson said, or whether you think it's Knicks in 5, like some other Knicks fans may be saying, they're going to be close games. These games will be decided at the end by these star players making plays late. And if Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland are hitting big shot after big shot and they can't answer it with shots from Brunson and shots from Randall, Knicks will lose. It's that simple. If the Cavs and Donovan Mitchell outplay the Knicks stars, they're going home. And that's really what's going to come down to. So the Knicks can't have, obviously, how Julius Randle played 2 years ago. Like that is they're dead on arrival if they get that Julius Randle. He has to play pretty much to the standard he played for the majority of this season, where he's lined up for another All-NBA selection. Jalen Brunson's going to have to be the closer, which he's been for the majority of this season. If that doesn't happen and Garland and Donovan Mitchell outplay those guys, Knicks will lose.
Yeah, you can make it. I think we're speaking the same language, and the reality is they're going to be close games, exactly like you said. I think you can predict the Cavs in 5 or the Knicks or whatever, but I think everybody would be surprised if there are blowouts consistently game. I think it's going to come down to the final 5 minutes, and that's when you make your money.
All right, prediction time. Who wins this series and why, Tommy?
I'm fascinated by the series, and just because it's on so many levels, and just just a few numbers here. They say styles make fights. Cavs, number 1 in the league in defensive efficiency. I talked about keeping teams on 100 points. They ranked first in the NBA in opponents' points per game. The only team in the NBA to keep teams under 107 points. Only team first in defensive efficiency. Only team to keep their opponents under 110 points per 100 possessions. The Knicks, on the other hand, third in the NBA in offensive efficiency. It's very rare that you get a first-round series where you get a top 3 offense against the top 3 defense. Sometimes you get in the Eastern Conference in a conference finals, or sometimes in the second round. But to get 2 teams matched up that are literally the very top of the league in each respective metric is really, really interesting. And one of the reasons Cleveland's so effective is because they force turnovers. 17.7 turnovers forced. That's third most in the NBA. One of the reasons the Knicks are so effective offensively is because they limit their turnovers. Commit just 13 turnovers a game, third fewest in the NBA. A lot of teams ask, a lot of folks ask, how can the Knicks be that good offensively in terms of defensive efficiency when they shoot, middle of the pack? They're 20th in the league in field goal percentage. They're 19th in the league in 3-point percentage. 2 primary reasons: they take care of the basketball, as I just mentioned, and they rebound the hell out of the basketball, especially on the offensive end. Mitchell and Stein, Hart, all contribute. Especially Mitch Robinson led the league in offensive rebounds a season per game. Whereas the Cavs have trouble, even despite their Twin Tower look. They're near the bottom of the league, especially over the second half of the season in terms of rebound. So there's just so many things kind of going back and forth. I think it'll be a great series. I think it'll be an extended series. I think it goes 7 games, and I'm going to pick the Knicks to beat the Cavs in Cleveland in that game.
There you go.
Another factor, as you know, Cavs have been very good at home, 31-10 at home, 5th most home wins in the league. The Knicks have been very, very good on the road, 24-17. The Bucks have 2 more wins than the Knicks. The Knicks basically tied for second in terms of most road wins this season. It's impossible not to watch the Cavs this season and not respect, what they bring to the table. And so obviously that this is in no way discounting that the series will be a very tough series for the Knicks. But it's so impossible to have watched this Knicks team from October April 14th this morning and the end of the regular season and not recognize that there's something special going on here. This is a talented, gritty, gutty group. And one of the things I've been most impressed by them is their ability to kind of overcome the odds, when things look like they're in the wrong direction. So if the Knicks can get to a game 7, understand home teams are highly, are usually trends towards the home team. I think that's a game New York can win. So I'm going to go on the record and say New York in 7.
There you go. New York in 7. So I think this is going to be a tough series. I think this is going to be a physical series. I think that this is going to be a series that's going to have multiple swings. But I'm going to agree with my guy, Tommy. I have the Knicks. I have them in the exact same games. I have them in 7 games in this series. I think the Knicks win game 1, catch Cleveland, not sleeping, but catch Cleveland trying to feel their way through the playoffs. And then the Knicks punch them in the mouth and they get a steal in game 1. I think that this is going to be a series where both teams win multiple games on the road. This is how this is going to go with the Knicks. The Knicks have been a great road team. At home, they've gotten better, especially since Josh Hart trade, but they've been very iffy. And for as great as the Garden crowd is, for whatever reason, people like playing there. People play there. They feel comfortable there. The Knicks have not made it an uncomfortable place to play. So I expect Mitchell to have a heater in one of these games. I expect Garland to have a heater in one of those games. I think the Knicks will actually end up losing 2 road games potentially. But I think the Knicks get 2 road games as well. I think they win game 1 at home. I think they win game 7 on the road. So I think you got bookend wins for the Knicks. You figure out where they win the rest of the games in there in between. But I think the Knicks win this series because I think that the Knicks will have an answer for Cleveland these late game situations with Jalen Brunson. I think that's the difference. That's the difference we've seen all season. Is that last season they lost so many games in which they had big leads or games in which they were right there at the end, but they couldn't execute. And the biggest reason was they did not have a point guard. The difference this time around is that they do. When they played against the Hawks in that series earlier 2 years ago, they did not have a point guard. And when they needed to close the game in game 1, they could not do it. Hawks had a closer. Hawks had a star point guard. They took game 1, and they kind of took the series by winning that game. Sometimes in a series, you win more than one game with a certain win. I felt like the Hawks won more than one game when they beat the Knicks in game 1. Things are so much different now because of Brunson. I think that the Knicks will have a statement win in game 1, and that'll set the tone for this series. I think will be not as easy as the Hawks have with the Knicks. That's not going to happen. But I think it'll make the Cavs understand, okay, this is going to be a real fight. I think it goes all the way to the end. But Jalen Brunson being the difference, I got the Knicks in 7.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I'm pinning my faith in is Jalen Brunson. I've seen enough from this kid over the past 6 months to say, I don't think there's anything he could do that would surprise me at this point. And going into a game 7 in Cleveland against an extremely talented backcourt. You need all those other things to get there, to get to a one possession game in the fourth quarter of a game 7. You need all those other things. You need Grimes to play really well, knock down shots, defend Mitchell, at least limit him to a certain extent. IQ, you need to do what he does. Josh Hart's going to do what he does. Hopefully Randall, you get a healthier version of Randall, relative healthy version of Randall. That's close to the 25-5 that we've seen all season. But you need all those things to get you there, and then you need something else to push you over the hump, and that's Jalen Brunson. The way he's played, the ability to come through in the clutch, he can do things. He can get buckets against great defenses because he doesn't need a lot of action. He doesn't need 3 pin down screens to get an open shot. He can take his man, isolate him, go left, right, get into the lane, fade away, draw foul, get to the free throw line. We know he has the stones to make big shots. And if you're a Knicks fan, that's what you're hoping for. It's just at least being in a position where you can let your most important player take you home.
Jalen Brunson may not be the most accomplished player in this series, but he's the most accomplished postseason player in this series. So that's what I'm leaning on. Donovan Mitchell is a great player, but he's never been to the Western Conference Finals. He hasn't had the kind of series. He's had good series, he's had big series, but he hasn't had the kind of series where they've won like Jalen Brunson had last season. So when I'm thinking about how you win the postseason, you need postseason players. I think Jalen Brunson's a postseason guy. Knicks in 7. And as one great man once said,
what's so good about Cleveland?
We'll see. We'll see what is so good about Cleveland. I think Jalen Brunson's going to have an answer for them. It's going to be a really fun series. So before we get out of here, I really have enjoyed the conversations this week. But to be honest, I'm ready for playoff basketball. Like, there's so much talking, so much prognosticating, so much previews. It's like, oh my God, can we get these teams playing already? And we're almost there. We're right at the precipice. So we record this podcast Friday morning. So the playoff field is mostly set. I still don't like how this playing tournament is kind of delayed, just knowing exactly who the actual playoff teams will be in terms of the full 16. But we still don't know who the Bucks will play. We still don't know who the Nuggets play. We have Friday games. You got the T-Wolves hosting the Thunder. You got the Heat hosting the who they play, the Bulls. So you got those games, and we'll see what happens with those teams. But we know the rest of the matchup. So I want to give a quick kind of premiere of just like what we're expecting in the postseason in the first round. So first time I ask you quickly, favorite or most anticipated first round matchup outside of Knicks and Cavs?
I'm going to go with a couple series out west, but in particular, the Grizzlies Lakers. We talked a little bit about it on Thursday's pod. I just think it's fascinating on so many respects. You got the John Morant angle coming off of a controversial season, let's say. They're dealing with some injuries down low. And you have the greatest player of all time, 1A or 1B, however you want to. You got LeBron, a healthy Anthony Davis. Just kind of, that's been a storyline when they make the postseason, and then Bron hurts his knee. They make the trade, and it just thing. I've always, I've always been a big admirer of LeBron and basically what he's done throughout his career. So I'd love to see him make some noise at age 38 and see what he can do and put a little pressure on the Grizzlies. So I would say that's, I think Kings Warriors is going to be awesome. And there's a lot of good stuff there. But if I had to pick one, the one series I'm looking forward to most, probably Lakers.
It's funny you mentioned, the Kings Warriors series. I think is really fascinating, and people are running to the Warriors. I really feel like the Kings may take that series. But for me, when I think about most anticipated matchup, first round, I got to go with the series you didn't mention that we know is happening. We don't know who the Nuggets is playing, but I think it's the Clippers and Suns. In some ways, I'm a big wrestling fan, and whether you're watching wrestling now or you watch wrestling back in the old, territory days of the 70s and 80s, the AWA and all that stuff, NWA and all that stuff, you have your loser leaves town matches. This almost feels like a loser leaves town NBA playoff series, if that makes sense. Like, it feels like these are two teams that have been stuck in the middle of nowhere in terms of saying they're title contenders, but haven't really been able to actually win a championship. Suns got there a couple years ago, then took a major step back last season. They make the trade for Kevin Durant. The Clippers, they've been saying they're title contender for, it seems like, since they got PG and Kawhi and no Western Conference final appearances. And it feels like there's a ton of pressure on both of these teams to get to an NBA Finals, even though they're a 4 and 5 seed and they're playing in the first round. So it feels like the loser of this series faces major changes next season, whether it's coaches being fired, whether it's multiple players being traded. Like, the loser of this team will look nothing like how they look coming into the series. So that's why this series is really fascinating to me, because I think it's a loser leaves town kind of series. Whoever wins, you feel like, wow, man, they beat a really tough team in the first round, and now you can really buy into them as a true title contender. I think people already buy into the Suns, but everybody will buy into the Clippers if they win. And the loser, you say, all right, who are we trading? Who's getting fired? Like, we can't come back with these same guys again next season if we lose in the first round of the playoffs, especially if they lose in an embarrassing fashion. So loser leaves town in the first round of the playoffs. I'm looking forward to seeing Suns versus some Clippers.
I would love this series if Paul George was healthy. The fact that he's going to miss it. It sounds like he's going to miss at least the start of the series. Maybe comes back game 3 or something along those lines. We'll see. But I just think, and I picked the Clippers to get to the finals at the start of the season. But I can't take a team seriously. You don't know who's going to show up night in, night out. Can they flip the switch? Kawhi Leonard, we've talked about, Jimmy Butler, joking around, saying it's time to start playing. That's how I feel about the Clippers. Tremendous talent from the bottom, like 9 to 10. But I haven't loved the way they've handled it this season. So I can't buy into them now. I honestly think that the Suns are gonna disperse with them pretty handily. Durant looks healthy. So I'd like to see CP3 make a little run here and get back to, hopefully, we'll see if he wins a title this season. Paul George is there. Again, I have a ton of respect for those two guys, the combo of George and Leonard. But are they going to stay healthy? If they come back, is Kawhi going to, just something doesn't feel right, hasn't felt right with that Clippers team all season. So I think the Suns are peaking at the right time, have a great combination of size, leadership, veterans, young players. I think that the Suns are a little bit too much for LA.
All right. Player with the most improved in these postseason. Who do you have for that?
I just mentioned Chris Paul. I think he's in there. You could pick Durant on that same Suns team, but I think the answer is probably Jokic. So much talk about, does he deserve to win 3 MVPs? No, he doesn't, because he didn't win. He hasn't advanced to the conference finals or the finals, even though the MVP is regular season award. So it's kind of ridiculous to put the two together. Yeah, I think the two big guys, Jokic and Embiid, over in the Eastern Conference, Jokic sounds like he's going to, win his first MVP. And talk about a team, with a lot of questions if they don't get the job done this postseason. What happens with Harden as he enters, he can become a free agent. Is Doc Rivers fired? Does Embiid demand changes? Does he threaten to, request trade if they don't, make moves that he wants them to make? What do they do with Tobias Harris? So a lot of pressure, I think, on Philly and Embiid, and obviously out in Denver on Mr. Jokic.
Yeah, I think you're right on those two guys for sure. I'm gonna stay in Philly though. I'm actually gonna go to James Harden, because I think it felt like that last series they played against Miami last year when they lost, that people pretty much blamed Harden. They were like, he's out of shape. He wasn't ready to go. And when Embiid got hurt and they needed the other star/superstar to step up, he didn't show up. So if Harden does that again, he can't come back to Philly. We already saw what they did to Ben Simmons. If he has a series like he did against the Miami Heat, he won't be back. I don't think that the fans would allow them to bring him back. He's gonna be a free agent anyway. And look, he seems the kind of guy perfectly content to just take his money and go to Houston. So
yes,
it may not be ain't sweat on his back, but I'm just saying for his legacy, we want to have that conversation. Or there's pressure coming into the series, like he needs to get it done. He has to be a star. Now he's playing with Embiid, so there's not all this pressure on him. He should have way more favorable matchups now. That's why I think it was so disappointing how he played last season. I think Harden comes in this season with the most to prove. Favorite sleeper team coming into this postseason?
If I had to pick a sleeper team, I would, are the Warriors, are the Lakers a sleeper team?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're the fourth best odds to come out of the West,
right,
according to Vegas.
So
that still counts.
I guess so. It's kind of cheating. You know what? I'll go the opposite direction, and I'll take the 3 seed Kings, who I think are underdogs. According to this, I see them making a deep run. Otherwise, I think there's going to be a lot of chalk early on. So I don't really see, Hawks. I think they're going to be handled easily by the Celtics.
I agree.
So I don't see any of the, whether it's the Bulls or the Heat out east, or the Thunder or the Timberwolves making much noise either. So I think it's going to be a lot of chalk advancing into the second round.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I do agree, though, if I was to take a sleeper team, it would be the Kings, because it seems like everybody's ready to run to the Warriors. The Warriors, and everybody knows how much I love Steph Curry, but they've been a awful road team. So, and the Kings have been one of the best home teams, and that's one of the best home court advantages. And we know how old the old Arco Arena used to be back in the day, playing in those games. That Kings home court advantage is going to be incredible in these games. And I think that people are sleeping because they haven't really paid attention. But the Kings have, in my opinion, the best offense in the NBA. They have the best clutch scorer in the NBA, in De'Aaron Fox. And I just take credence in what teams do in the regular season. I don't just say, okay, I know you're a young team and I know you're playing against the defending champs, but what you did in the regular season doesn't matter. Like, I don't care that you've won however many games and you've been solid. These are the reasons why you're going to lose. I've never been that guy. So I think the Kings not only can win this series, I think they can win another series as well. I think that they could beat Memphis or the Lakers in a second round series as well. So you can be looking at conference finals, Sacramento Kings team. So that's the sleeper team I have, because I think that not only can they win in the first round, they can go on a deep run through the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, that Sacramento crowd is going to be fired up. Obviously, breaking the longest postseasonless streak in NBA history. They're going to ready to light the beam. And the one thing with the Warriors, though, they are getting Andrew Wiggins back. Hasn't played since February.
Big returns.
Huge for the Warriors. But again, is he in shape? Is he rusty? How does he look on floors is going to impact all that stuff. But that's a major addition for the Warriors.
Yeah.
Because without him, I would have said I would have definitely picked the Kings, but him coming back, don't forget, he was wasn't the MVP of the finals last year, but he was the second best player.
He was huge. Yeah. That viral clip of him, Andre Iguodala, calling him over and getting him refocused. I think it was in game 3 or game 4. really set Andrew Wiggins up for the rest of that series, and he was crucial in that series, no question. All right, here we go. Who comes out of the East? Who comes out of the West? Who wins it all?
I had the Bucks winning the title prior to the season. I'm going to stick with Milwaukee winning the championship. Obviously, the concern with Middleton is significant. They need a healthy Chris Middleton. I think they beat the back bending chains as of this moment. Had Middleton not injured his last year, his knee last year, and then I got the Suns coming out of the West, so I'll have Milwaukee versus Phoenix, with Milwaukee taking the title.
So before the season, I had the Sixers winning the championship, and I had them coming out of the East, obviously. Milwaukee looks great, so I feel like this is probably against my better judgment, but I'm going to stick with that because I did believe that Embiid would have a monster season that he has. I believe that Embiid would finally get over the hump in the playoff, which I think he will. So I'm going to stick with the Sixers coming out of the East. The Western Conference team I have is New Orleans Pelicans, who are not in the postseason. So we can't have those. So now I get a full mulligan, and I have a whole crop of now 9 teams technically, because the Thunder and the and whoever they play, the T-Wolves are technically still in the mix. The West is so hard, but I'm going to agree and say that it's the Phoenix Suns. I think the Suns beat the Kings in the conference championship. I think that second round match between the Nuggets and Suns is going to be really, really good. That might be the best series of all these series, I think, to be honest. But I'm going to say that the Suns and the Sixers in the NBA Finals. I hate to do it because with KD, with KD, the question I always ask is the same.
Tell me a little something, KD. Don't you regret not coming to the Knicks? Don't you regret not coming to the Knicks?
Unfortunately, I think KD will be able to say, no, I don't regret it, because now I'm in the Suns and now I have another NBA championship. So I think that, even though I picked the Sixers to win it all, I think that the Suns, they got to find a way to stay healthy. They got to find a way to stay healthy. And me picking them, despite some of the issues they had in the regular season, is against using my principles. But I just think there's too much firepower in that starting lineup. I think they have enough. I think that the Suns win in probably about 6 games over the Sixers in the NBA Finals. That's my pick. That's where we're going. Can't wait to get it going. Playoffs is here. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. We will be having plenty of postseason coverage, particularly with the New York Knicks throughout their run through the playoffs. Make sure you keep it locked with us, Orange and Blue Bloods. Of course, this is a podcast you can get wherever you get your podcasts, including the free Audacy app. Make sure you hit the auto download feature on your streaming service so you can get these episodes every time we drop. We'll be dropping throughout the playoffs, so make sure you stay locked here, Orange and Blue Bloods. Also, check us out on YouTube. Audacy Sports and WFAN on the YouTube page where you can find our content. Tommy, let people know where they can find you.
At Tommy Beer on Twitter.
You can find me, EJ_Stewart on Twitter, Action EJ on Instagram and TikTok. You can't thank you guys so much for checking out this Knicks Cavs playoff preview. We'll be talking some recap episodes next week. Thank you guys again. For Tommy, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. If you want to see more of our videos, be sure to check out our playlist and let us know what you think in the comments below.
Also, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay up to date on our latest podcast ventures. Links will be in the descriptions. And as always, thanks for watching, and we will see you in our next video.